just you get to choose. Right? Like here's the scenario. The environment gives us something which can be perceived as negative, can be perceived as not working, can be perceived as problematic. The world's ending. So we get to choose to see it like that, or we get to choose to see it as an opportunity.
So clearly that it's my responsibility now to do that for other people. If I have information and, other people's success is my success and vice versa.
Because you know what? Like the challenges or the roadblocks are the journey themselves.
There's no big things. It's all little things compounding on top of each other. Coach Nick and I are very grateful to be able to host Truth Seekers every single week. We appreciate your listenership and your engagement. Thank you very much. This week, Rich Levert joins Truth Seekers. Rich was born in Southern California, but spent most of his childhood in a small farming town near Montreal, Canada. He started working in the electrical field in 2004 for his grandfather when he moved back to California. A few years later, after settling in North Carolina and working for a national electrical contractor, Rich started his own electrical company, Arc Electric, and then established a plumbing division, Arc Plumbing, a few years later. It has been a whirlwind past 10 years for Rich. He has steadily grown from just himself in a truck to 13 service vehicles and 15 employees, and growing. He loves the service industry and has a passion for meeting new people and developing long-term relationships. Constant change and meeting new people has helped him become a better business owner and grow a better company. In his free time, when he can find some, Rich loves exploring new restaurants and traveling with his wife, Cassie, and 3 kids, Hayden, Kylie, and Noah. Among several topics on this week's episode, we discussed the concepts of hiring based on personalities as opposed to resumes, being precise when it comes to communication, inviting the right amount of chaos into your life, and of course, we had to ask Rich, what kind of books does he read? As always, we thank you for your listenership and your support with the Truth Seekers podcast, and we hope you enjoy Rich Levert on this week's episode of Truth Seekers. All right, welcome everybody to another episode of Truth Seekers. We have Rich joining us today. We will introduce him in just a moment. Of course, you can find us everywhere you watch your podcasts and proadvisorcoach.com. So Rich, thank you for joining us. We appreciate you being on Truth Seekers.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I wanted to start off today. I think the topic of business philosophy is what's grasping my attention, and just the different outlooks of business. And I think you have a cool story that I was hoping you could kick us off with today with, that moment that you knew that you could be or wanted to be a business owner.
Yeah, it's interesting that we're going over this again today. Earlier, I was in a meeting, and one of the people we were having a meeting with, he was talking about how he came about and how he kind of progressed and started his own company and everything. And he was saying as he grew up, he kind of no one ever told him that he couldn't succeed to different levels. No one kind of told him, and he thought that was just how people thought. And then the more and more he interacted with people, he didn't see that way. And it's kind of similar how I fell into starting my own company. I was, climbing the corporate ladder as you would as a giant construction company. And more and more I was doing less physical work, and to the point where I really wasn't doing much but playing golf and being in meetings and interacting with the higher level people, interacting with the people that are managing different things and purchasing different companies and the owners of these giant corporations. And when we were doing that and having conversations a lot, it's not like they didn't seem to have a whole lot more breadth of knowledge than I did. And that might have been my young hubris, arrogance, or whatever you may call it. But it really dawned on me that there's no reason why I can't achieve that level. The only difference was there was no way I could do that within that company. I kind of had to start now, as the guy that owned the company started back when he was back in 1982, I believe. But so it kind of spurred me to leave and start my own company, just knowing that I didn't see that they had any more extra skill sets that I didn't have or anything that I was lacking. It was just a matter of jumping.
Just curious where that comes from, Rich. Is that something that just dawned on you one day, or has that been ingrained in you to look out and just see opportunity like, hey, these are just normal people, or where did that come about, do you think?
I'm not sure exactly where it would have come about. I mean, my father always kind of he was a serial entrepreneur. It kind of turned like when I was growing up and looking at everything, they kind of changed companies and different companies and completely different venues. Like he owned a restaurant, then a construction company, then an excavation company. And when I started and being in it, the corporate world kind of appealed to me at first, kind of following that and having a more set trajectory and not the ups and downs and ebbs and flows that can come with, having different companies and coming in and out of different fields. And the more I did that, then I kind of dawned on me and realized that I could do it too and take maybe from both worlds and start my own thing and just stick with the one thing, but having my own company and doing that. So I'm not exactly sure what spurred that moment or that thought, but it's probably been there forever of being an entrepreneur like my dad had. It was more of that moment kind of made me realize where I was isn't exactly where I wanted to be. So.
Yeah, it always starts with that. I think I'd like to get Coach Nick's thoughts on this, because this is where we operate from, just an idea that anything is possible. And quite often we see that in other people before they see that in themselves. But it's so true. We can, first of all, our experiences shape how we see the world, but we have this other place that we can go to dig deep or to reach further within ourselves to become somebody more greater. Coach, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And what jumped out for me when you started to share that, Rich, was ignorance is bliss. Like that's where that comes from, right? So I'd love to know the next part of that story, right? Because by itself it's really powerful. I'm sure people that are watching and listening can relate that to some of the things in their journey and what we believe as we grow up, or any point of our life, is what we do, right? Because what we believe to be true is what we act in accordance of. And if we believe that there's nothing to stop me, then that's how we'll act, right? And if we believe that I could do that just as good as they can, then why wouldn't I do that, right? And so I wonder, as you went into the next step of that, did you find that at some point you went, oh shit, like was there any of those moments where you kind of got like a bit more? Because
definitely there. I mean, I think anybody that starts a business is going to have that moment. I think from me talking to as many people as I could regarding people starting their own businesses and stuff like that, it seems to be completely based on personality as far as what that moment, like, what that is. That's kind of like, oh, what did I do here? Did I do a good idea or not? Yeah. For me, I was never a very big organizer or planner or did anything. I was kind of, I'd show up to school and take the test that day and kind of winged it as much as I could. And it kind of set me up for being more, I guess, being comfortable thinking on my feet and adapting to things that change. And there was definitely a lot, especially at the beginning, that I guess planning would have helped me a lot that I didn't do. And then there's a lot that I thought I knew or had it in the bag, and then you're completely mistaken or completely wrong about what you're doing. But the positive thing is because of how I was and how my personality is, I was very quick to stop doing what wasn't working very quickly, or perceive that quickly to say, hey, this is not going to work, and change that and kind of be malleable. So I mean, if anybody's going to jump and do that, I think you kind of need a little bit of both. You need to do some planning, but not enough that it's going to drown you in doubt of actually starting it. You kind of have to jump, and the more you plan, the more you look at it, the more you're going to give yourself reasons not to do it. But then again, you have to be able to change your plan and be malleable on that too. From what I've seen, but like I said, I think it depends on what people's personalities are going to be and how they're going to react to things.
Absolutely. We're always in that place. Coach often says, like, this is what we talk about and this is what we reference. And there's so many principles and concepts, but that balance between the structure and the freedom is such an important thing, and it's always changing. But it's interesting to hear you say that, Rich, because it sounds like that you pulled out, like it was the organization that you didn't like, or you didn't think you were good at. I would say, like, you flipped on its head. It's the fact that you like the adaptability, the thinking on your feet. It's like, for me, that's like classic entrepreneur, right? Like, I want action, results, like I want the thrill of the chase, and someone else can do the paperwork, right? Like that's, so probably the appeal of the corporate world run out like relatively quickly, and you start to look for those other things. So I'd love to hear about that change for you, because those two for me are like conflicting a little bit. So how did that feel?
I mean, for sure. I mean, I think it's definitely that balance between the order and the chaos, right? Which is like the typical examples that people use. And I realized I was kind of bored in the order too much. I was always looking for different things to do or moving around, and it didn't allow me to do that as much as I did. And then, like I said, having these meetings and sitting around, and we were actually playing golf, and they were having different conversations about the field and everything. And I had just gotten my electrical license, so I had the tools that I needed to actually start my own company. It was more like, why would I leave a great job that they pay me to play golf to start my own company? And
Bored.
right. And I think the having more of the chaos is oddly enough more of what I needed. You know what I mean? Like I think everybody's kind of straddling that line, and which side are you more on? And I needed more, I guess, more stress. I don't know. Maybe I'm a glutton for punishment. I don't know exactly what the best way to put it is, but I needed to kind of push myself more and see if I could fail. I guess I don't know.
I love it. That juices me up, Rich, because that's exactly how I feel as well. Right? I want the chaos, but I also remind myself that like the order and the chaos, like you said, they're two ends of complete like a massive spectrum. You know, it's like just because you like the chaos doesn't mean you want to be in chaos, but you prefer to have the creativity, right? Like I just want just enough order so I can be free to go create, right? To go and put myself on the edge, and like that's because that's where I think the fun begins, right? It's been said that life.
That's the everyday. Which side are you on? And some
Yeah,
days, I'm sure you guys have your business and everything. Some days it's, wait, I'm too much into chaos. I know this is too much. Don't go back to this way. So it's definitely a
yep,
constant balance. That's for sure.
yep,
It's a
absolutely.
very, very fluid thing. So maybe segue into what the business is all about. Tell us about your company, about your business, and what you're working on right now.
Yeah, well, at the time I was working for a giant electrical contractor, and they're nationwide and everything. And I started that. My grandfather had an electrical business in California, and when I moved back to California, when my parents moved to North Carolina, I started working for him. Not necessarily as that was my end goal, just that it was the job I had then, and I kind of really liked it compared to other construction I had done because of the troubleshooting aspect of it. Every day was kind of different, and you kind of had to solve problems and different stuff, and it's kind of an evolving trade compared to a lot of the other construction things. So I stuck with that, and then yeah, it was kind of what I was doing, and I definitely did see that I liked more of the business aspect of a lot of the work, which kind of led me, especially in the other company, to do less electrical work hands on, which I missed a little bit, but also it allowed me to venture more into the business world and kind of how to do deals and everything like that. A lot of times they were, discussing and buying other companies and stuff like that. So I was involved, and I really, really like that aspect of it. So it's kind of, like I said, that kind of spurred me to start my own company. So we started that. It was just me in a truck, as I guess as you would. I was not a big fan to borrow a bunch of money or do it on somebody else's dime. And I had read as many books as I could, and a lot of them were when you borrow a bunch of money, it hides a lot of mistakes you're making early, because it allows you to make those mistakes and you don't feel them as badly. So I kind of wanted to go in it alone as much as I could with everything I had. When I did it, my wife was 8 months pregnant when I quit and jumped. So I guess I really wanted the chaos side, kind of jumped in with both feet on that end. So that's how it started. And after that, I was very aggressive with the growth. I saw a lot of people that I knew that had their own businesses, and it was just them in a truck or them and one helper, and they were kind of stuck. And then at a certain point, they're 60 years old and they're still working, and it's just them in a truck still. And you're basically just giving yourself a job at that point, and that's not what I wanted. So I was very aggressive from the beginning to not kind of get complacent and keep growing fast, and kind of pushing all the time. And you're constantly uncomfortable. There's constantly too much work, or you hire a guy and then there's not enough work for a short period of time. So, but that's kind of the philosophy I went about it. I'm still kind of in that phase of growing it and kind of accelerating everything. I think we spoke about this last time. We started plumbing 4 years ago and added that division to us. So, go in that direction.
And up to how many trucks today, Rich?
We have 7 electrical trucks and 3 plumbing trucks right now. So
Awesome.
10 total.
Curious, and Coach and I are always curious whenever any guests mention books, we always want to know what people are reading. What's a key book or a couple books that you can share with us?
Oh, there's quite a bit. The problem is you read so many, you don't know which one was good or which one. You read all of the specific ones, like the Little Red Book of Selling and stuff like that. In the trades, there's one specifically called the E-Myth. And that was good to see how a lot of them run. I take a lot of them to see how they do it, and I kind of put my own twist on everything. So that was always a thing. Good to Great was actually a very good book that I liked.
Yeah.
Richard Branson, but I forget which one it was one of the early ones I read. And one of the things I took from his was the hiring process, that he focuses on hiring the person and their personality versus their resume. Because you can always, especially in our trades, like I can teach somebody to do electrical work. I can't teach them personality. I can't teach them character. And so I took that from that book kind of from the beginning to heart, and it's kind of served me well. We have a really good group of guys, so that's kind of helped out a lot. I like it, a lot of the books. You kind of take certain parts of it and certain chapters and move on. Like right now, somebody suggested Extreme Ownership, so I'm reading that one right now. Seems pretty good. I'm only a couple chapters in, so
you got a whole bunch of thumbs up from Coach Nick. So apparently there's some overlap. I'm a big fan of the Little Red Book of Sales as well. That was my, that's my background as business development, and just some of the tricks and the tips and some of this, just so much wisdom in that book. And like you said, you almost forget like what you take away, but you find yourself applying those things, and then you go back years later and read it. It's like, oh, is that where I got that from? So it's all, you're just a sponge, right? You're just soaking up as much as possible, and then you're using your intuition to implement these different things.
I pretend it's just all my information now. So
there you go. Yeah.
Well, you know what? Like I'll add to that, because like if you think about all of those books you mentioned, they're all great books. That's why you got the thumbs up. In fact, I have not read the Little Red Book of Sales, though. I haven't read that. All the other ones, I think they're awesome.
Not to interrupt, Coach, but Jeffrey Gittimer lives in Charlotte here. I had dinner with him maybe 2 months ago, so I'll make an introduction if you'd like.
Oh, cool.
There you go. You get a signed copy.
Let's do that. Yeah. Awesome. Are you buying dinner, Coach? Because that sounds good.
We'll see if we can get Jeffrey to do that. Let me talk.
All right. But it's as you said, Rich, it's taking out the things and using them, because this is what we do every day, right? We look at what principles, applications, and how they fit in individual people and businesses. Nothing's new. There's no new stuff here. Right. And so when you take it and say they're mine now, it's like, well, yeah, because there's no new principles invented. Like it's all the same stuff. It's just whether you see it at the right time and what language and how it's represented, whether it falls in or not. Right. So I read one book, I read another book. There's so many overlaps. Yeah. The
principles have definitely stayed the same. I think a lot of it is some people don't know why they're successful. So you get a lot of books that make no sense. A lot of things too that I've noticed is a lot of things that I've read and you read and it just seems like it's basic or it makes sense. And it only really makes sense after you're really involved in it and it's a reoccurring issue. I use this example with other people, but like communication, you hear that all the time. It's like, well, what's the key to this? It's communication, even like personal relationships, communication. And you see in the books like, oh, communication in a company. And you're like, well, that seems simple enough. And then you get into a company, and after you get a certain size, you realize but I don't think that they vocalize it correctly as far as what I've read and everything. It's not necessarily communication. You could talk to people the whole time. That doesn't help. It doesn't work. I think what I saw works, and it's mainly because of my trade. We train apprentices basically. So I train somebody. My manager now is actually my apprentice at one of the big companies I worked for before. And you train them to do electrical work. And then when there's a million ways to skin a cat kind of thing. There's a bunch of ways to do electrical work. And then when you're talking to somebody that you've trained or somebody that trained you or vice versa, you're speaking in the exact same language, not just communication, like you know exactly how he's doing a certain thing. And applying that to kind of the company and having like our dispatcher speak to customers in the exact same manner as our techs speak to customers, the same manner as our managers speak to customers. And to me, that's what I took from the communication. And that was kind of learning from mistakes of people misinterpreting what somebody else said, or this guy, oh, your technician told me this, or your office, and they misinterpret certain some way, and coming up with a very similar language and speaking the exact same way is how I took the communication to be a giant factor in my business. But again, like I said, you read a bunch of books that talk about communication, and until you get into that, you don't realize what that really means. So that was a big one for me.
Wow. Thanks for that, Rich. That's really powerful, right? Because you first got to define, communication. You've got to define what is communication. And then you've got to define what does it mean for me in this particular setting. Okay. And then how do you actually apply it? What are you things you actually do? What's the real strategy behind it? It's so easy just to say, okay, it's this, and that. It's like, oh, trust is important. It's like, yeah, but what does it mean and how do you apply it? And how do people know that you're talking about the same thing when you're talking about it, right? It's the precision around that is another big principle that we're always working on, because most people are too general.
Oh yeah.
Most
Not
people,
just that, we're all from different backgrounds and
yeah,
places, especially in North Carolina. I mean, you have people that have been here forever, people from the Northeast, people from the West and different countries. And you're just, we all speak the same language, but we don't speak it the same way and come off in different manners. And, I can have a New York employee and they're going to come off very brash and forceful to some Southern customers that we have. And it's just, they're not being rude at all. They're just coming off that way. Just so I think focusing on that has helped us a lot on how people come off and the language that you're using, and being the same and being consistent has helped our communication as a team for sure.
So funny you say that, Rich. So facilities was my last industry. That's where I came from before coaching. And that was, we had to make sure our account managers were aligned with the types of people that would respond to them correctly. So we had people from New York, we had people from the Midwest, and everybody resonates differently depending on the type of person. So that's kind of funny you mentioned that.
Yeah, and in 2021, we're talking about principles don't change, but a lot of different business parts change. One of them is emails and stuff like that, where you don't get people's cadences and different ways they say things. My in-laws, they have a shipping company that deals with a lot of international companies, and they send emails everywhere in different places, and they're like, just everybody writes in English, but they're all from different countries and different places. Somebody's from Singapore, somebody's from Ireland, and they're all saying different things, and you have no idea. You could think some guy's coming off as an asshole, and it doesn't really need to be. And then there's a lot of miscommunication that way. When there's no words that are being miscommunicated, it's just completely sideways, and you think somebody's sliding you when they're not, and kind of goes both ways. So it's interesting to see that, where we can all speak the same words, but we're not saying the same thing. So it's kind of interesting. It's been definitely been a focus when we started the company. So
Absolutely. Well, go ahead, Coach.
sorry. I was just going to say, what's one of the things that we often do when we meet with teams the first time, we remind people, and most people have heard this, but what is communication? Like, how do we receive things, right? And then what are the parts of it, right? It's the words that we actually say, it's the way that we say them, like tonation, but it's also our physicality when we're saying them, right? And the actual words, to your point, Rich, is only like seven makes up 7%. 7%. It's like barely anything, and the vast majority, over 50%, is your physical body, like how you're holding your body, what you're doing with your body, and that even comes. You can even hear some of that through the tonation. So the combination of the physicality and the tonation is what makes a difference. Because on email, you have none of that. So it's like, what are you saying?
Yeah.
Are you
100%? Especially, look at Twitter. It's like a cesspool of miscommunication. So it's definitely the world we're going into. It's not pretty.
Yeah. So let's start to grab some takeaways. That'll be my takeaway today. I'm going to steal a word that Coach used a couple minutes ago, is precision. Just the importance of being precise in anything. So communication especially, but also just making sure roles are defined and there's clarity amongst the team with the vision. Precision is my takeaway today for how important that is in anything in business. How about you?
No, it definitely. I mean, again, like you can read that in a book before you start a company, and you're like, what is? I'll be precise. Like I know. Then once you get started, you realize all of the little facets that precision becomes a thing, like, being consistent with everything and precisely saying the correct words to customers or clients and everything. And it becomes more impactful. So, and it might be a good idea. And I didn't even think about it till I was talking to you guys, but I'm probably going to go reread some of the books and see kind of where those things have reapplied and kind of where I can readjust or if I can understand it differently. So it'd probably be a completely different take. I'm definitely not who I was 12 years ago. So
Absolutely. Coach, how about a takeaway from you today?
Great distinction. Great, Rich. Like that is back to the type of person that I can see that you are, just in this little time I've got to know you, that wanting to move towards the action, that the preference for the moving forward and be a little bit more in the chaos than the order, right? It's just like you committing to yourself that you're going to go read some books, right? That's so cool. So for me, that's a big takeaway. And really the baseline of what we started here was around like the belief that you can do it, right? You believe you can or believe you can't. Either way, you're right. And it's such a cliche thing to say, but like I always say about cliches, it's now a cliche itself, because cliches are cliches for a reason, because they're true. And so if you got to think about what you believe about yourself, like that's the limitation that you're putting around yourself, whatever that might be, no matter how successful you are.
Yeah, no, for sure.
And so Rich will give you the final word, a takeaway, advice you give to people, more, plug for your company, any way you want to wrap up here.
I will say I am kind of becoming a little bit more comfortable giving advice to people starting business because I want more people to kind of succeed on everything. And one thing I would say, if somebody that hasn't started a business, is it is kind of like you're falling forward, and that's a good thing. And the precision and the communication and everything that we just talked about is you kind of just catching up with the chaos and kind of keeping on the order side. So I would put starting a business akin to that. You're kind of just falling forward and catching yourself all the time. So and if you don't keep moving forward, in my aspect anyway, and that might just be where I'm at with the business, it kind of, then you're going to stay stagnant. So I keep trying to like read more books or reread books, or try to kind of keep evolving yourself to learn more of how to be better, or how to keep growing the business and moving forward and getting more into the chaos part. So
love that. Appreciate it. A nice leave off there, to embrace uncertainty. It's not always a bad thing. Sometimes there's creative new approaches and solutions that we come up with as business owners along the way. So Rich, thank you so much for joining Truth Seekers. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you for watching another episode of Truth Seekers. We appreciate your interaction. So please comment, like, subscribe to YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want more, check out some of our links. Links to our masterclass, The Achiever's Mindset, and come and join our LinkedIn group. And what do you want to see more of? Remember, we're here to share the simple secrets of successful. So help us do that. What do you want to see? What do you want to see more of? Thanks, and see you again next time.